Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Ofentse Davhie. Let's get into our news stories of today. And while I think when we were discussing what we were going to talk about for this show, we sort of decided that there was no way we could escape it. All roads and all stories here led to Joburg. But we're going to see if we can hold ourselves off, maybe make a pit stop on the way by just checking in how the budget is going. So yesterday, Herman and I covered the budget in sort of a high-level terms. But Ofentse and I thought that perhaps we could go through just a little bit more of the details underneath and also get Ofentse's take on the national budget. So the Daily Maverick put out quite a useful little story called What Was Promised in the State of the Nation Address versus What the Treasury Funded. These two events are held together because they are indeed supposed to be linked together. The SONA gives you the sort of vision and the list of priorities, and then the budget is actually like how the government is going to spend money to make that happen. Now, in previous years, there has often been a very tenuous connection between these two things on certain things. For example, every year, NHI has been recommitted to in various ways, and then when it comes time for the actual budget, not a lot of money is allocated to NHI. And that's something we can even mention today. I don't think NHI really got anything as it's been currently. Its promulgation has been suspended. But Ofentse, what did you make of some of the specific provinces and allocations made in the budget? We talked a little bit about the tax stuff yesterday, which we thought was pretty good. When it comes to spending money, our government is not very efficient at it. So, all of these numbers should be taken a bit with a grain of salt, because just because it says some many billions will be spent, the amount that will actually reach that the sort of end use there, I think, is not nearly high enough. But what is your take on the budget in general?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show today. And my take on that is that the respective bodies that will be doing the spending will be quite happy that there's a lot more to spend this year than there was last year. In comparison to the SONA promises that were made by President Ramaphosa, so in terms of the SONA, to give a 10-word review on it probably won't be 10 words, is that the first half of his address was very positive, and then at the end he kind of lost us when he started talking about the bullet trains and all of that. But the reason why the first half was very promising,
gotta have the bullet trains in there. It wouldn't be a
something. There has to be some lofty goal thrown in every SONA speech. But the first half was quite good and positive, and the reason why is because he repeated the need to focus on public spending on fixed assets, on fixed investment assets. And that's a number we typically at the CRA and also you in the IRR and just the organization, the focus we take is on gross fixed capital formation. We take that number very seriously, and we think that an improvement in that number will trickle down to a positive on all the other metrics. What it is the amount of investment spent on fixed assets in South Africa. It's easy to buy stocks, but it's just as easy to remove your share of stocks as it is to put in money into stocks. But when you invest in a building or a factory and something that will last for 10, 15 years, that really shows business confidence and business sentiment. And now Ramaphosa was promising that the public spending on gross fixed capital formation will go up. And we saw a bit of that in the budget speech yesterday. We saw that there will be an increase in investment, or rather an increase in spending on infrastructure, just over a trillion rand, which is about the same as last year's. I had to check from last year's speech to make sure that we're not celebrating for nothing. It's not just a repetition of what's being said last year. It's a slight increase from last year. Last year was also ranging in the trillion rand range, but it is an increase, and it's a direction. It's a shift to the right direction. It's a positive sentiment, and we see in the Daily Maverick article that came out that compares the SONA scoreboard to the budget. We see those promises were delivered in terms of water infrastructure, in terms of logistics, in terms of also border protection, not counting the deployment of the South African National Defence Force, but in terms of infrastructure, in terms of building and getting people to build these infrastructures that the government will now be spending more money on. That is a positive that I think should be celebrated. Amongst all of that, there's also other spending outside of infrastructure that was promised in the SONA that has been delivered in the budget, and that's also on not only on that's on health. That's on health. So there was a big mention of social protection, but social protection does not only include grants. Social protection also involves health, and we know from the Doge initiative from the Trump administration that US aid and PEPFAR was cut, that all that funding was cut. South Africa runs the biggest HIV/AIDS program in the world. And so that funding was important and it legitimately saved lives. And it's not that South Africa can't fund itself, it's that the program was cut abruptly and our treasury could not prepare to fill that gap. But now that gap is being filled, and the finance minister explicitly mentioned PEPFAR twice, I think, in his speech. Or rather, he mentioned it once, but in the budget review, it's mentioned twice, or maybe 3 times even, that there should be a focus on filling in this gap that was left open. And so more money was put into health as well. And a pleasant surprise is that there was no mention of NHI. So the money being spent on health isn't being spent on an ideal that's a bit too radical for us to consume. It's programs that are existing that are helping lives. Some money was taken out because we were dependent on an external factor, but now more revenue has been collected and we can fill in that gap ourselves. So that's another win as well. And one last thing, which is not a win, is the deployment of the South African National Defence Force. We can already go, that can be an episode in itself, and I'm sure the Daily Friend has already covered it on why that's not such a brilliant idea. But in terms of that, funding as well for the Department of Defense is not anywhere near where it's supposed to be. The president has said in past that it would be ideal to be spending 1.5% of GDP on defense. And there was a claim that there has been a slight increase in the defense budget, but actually nominally and also in real numbers, there hasn't been an increase in the budget. It doesn't match the inflation rate, and thus our defense is still very much underfunded, and it trickles down or up. It trickles to our foreign policy. We don't have the teeth to deploy our foreign policy if we don't have the defense, both domestically with SAPs, but also with our defense force. And that's a point that should be raised.
Yeah, the defense force, I'm kind of sort of in 2 minds about. I mean, obviously, it is horrifically underfunded and it is badly managed, and it desperately needs sort of proper reinvestment and reorganization. And our colleague Ricardo is his hobby horse. He will tell us in all the ways that money should be spent and what we should be buying, and and how much should be given. Which, if Ricardo is in charge of the budget, it might be the entire budget. But it is at the same time. It's also one of the reasons we got to this state is it is kind of the easiest thing to cut, right? Particularly when we're not imminently in danger of being invaded, which I think really undermines the president's sort of. And it is kind of a PR stunt of just deploying the army to do things, because ultimately it doesn't solve underlying problems. Maybe there's some increase in capacity temporarily, but as we've mentioned before on the show, soldiers are not police. They do a different job. They're trained for a different thing. They're trained to kill people. They're trained to defend each other. They're not trained to manage a civilian population. So they're go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and on that, because they're now being deployed in the country against South Africans, that's going to cost money because now they're being deployed.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Because now they're underfunded and not enough money has been injected into the department, now it's under larger constraint than it was before.
Yeah. So I think unfortunately, the defense force has not got any kind of turnaround anytime soon. For me, and I did mention this briefly yesterday, one of the greatest areas of restraint was actually in the social relief of distress grant. It's an election year,
Yes.
and so I can see, the ANC being really keen to jack that number up, at least to keep it in line with inflation, if not increase it. I mean, it's not a lot of money. It's like, what, 370 Rand a month or something like that. But for a lot of people, that is a big thing for them. It's the largest social grant in terms of numbers of recipients, I think, by quite a large degree. And yet that wasn't increased. Now there's some talk of restructuring it into a livelihood grant. So I don't know what that means. I have a feeling it won't
that's
be
another
particularly
point.
discussed.
And that's another point that was not delivered in the budget speech that was mentioned in the SONA. It was mentioned in the last SONA that the SRD grant will be transformed into this livelihood, whatever. But then in the budget speech, we see it's the exact same thing. And it's actually supposed to end, the whole initiative is supposed to end next year in 2027. But once you start a social program, it lasts forever. I don't know how the saying goes, but exactly that.
Yeah, there's nothing as, I think it's a Milton Friedman quote, there's nothing as permanent as a temporary government program.
Exactly that.
And the truth is, like, I understand, obviously there are people who desperately need to rely on that grant, but the real problem is that people don't have jobs. It shouldn't be your only option. And fiscally, it's one of those things that we're not going to be able to sustain long term, I think. Now, one of the very big things in the budget was that, or in the SONA rather, was that Ramaphosa promised, 150 something billion Rand in water infrastructure. We are seeing increasingly water crises across the country. And there are so many layers to this thing, as they always are. But one of the big ones is that government just really has either taken too long or just hasn't at all invested in larger water infrastructure projects, right, to make sure there's water. And then there's sort of problems of corruption and graft and mismanagement at the provincial level. And then when you get down to the municipal level, there's problems of corruption and graft, and most importantly, leaks and bad administration. We know Joburg is losing anywhere between 20 to 40% of its water to leaks, which is just a huge nightmare. So water is at the forefront of so many, and indeed in the budget, 185 billion Rand is being allocated, which is actually slightly more than Ramaphosa said would be, which is interesting. And it coincides with comments made by Enoch Godongwana. He was speaking to the media yesterday, where he said that national government must intervene in the governance delivery crisis in the city of Johannesburg. He said, quote, "My view is that national government has got to find a way of getting closer to the Joburg situation. What form that will take, I don't know. We've got to go there with some kind of legal instrument." Now, there's a lot of discussion about what this might be. Maybe dissolving the municipal council is the most extreme one. That would mean that a new one would have to be elected. Putting the council under administration, putting in more money, and this huge grant of water infrastructure money in the budget. I can see some of it perhaps making its way to the city there. So, Ofentse, city of Joburg, how do you think things stand currently? I think that the crisis is nowhere near being complete. And with the election approaching, you can see there's a lot more enthusiasm to fix the problem from the ANC.
Yeah, again, politics plays a big part in this. I don't think they'll even utter the idea of putting Johannesburg under administration. And I say this because Tshwane, nearly 10 years ago, was put under administration and was done so illegally. And so the whole thing had to be reversed. And then and this was when the DA was governing under a coalition. So there was a DA mayor in place and it was put under administration. And then recently again, it wasn't put under administration, but talks of it was a national conversation, especially amongst ANC politicians. of the idea of putting Tshwane under administration because of the water crisis in Hammanskraal, when people literally died. The conversation came up again, and it was under a DA mayor at the time. But now there has been no mention of putting Johannesburg under administration. There's been mention of government, national government getting involved, and they have their respective roles. All spheres of government, or rather, all spheres of government, national, provincial, and municipal, has a role to play in water maintenance and water infrastructure of the country. Sure, that's fine, but there's been no talk of Johannesburg being dissolved or being put under administration. So that's very much politics being at play. The ANC can't afford to do that in an election year, to just remove the ANC mayor and admit, you know what, we have failed. It would be so embarrassing, and it would give Helen Zille way too many shots to shoot during the campaign season. So that's something that won't happen, and it's actually very funny and telling that the national level of the ANC is admitting to failure, that we're not solving this issue properly at the municipal level, but they would like to intervene, but there needs to be some policy that can come up that we can use to intervene the way we want to intervene. Either you put it under administration or you just play your part. There's been presidential work in committees. There's this bomb squad that apparently is up, and I don't know who they take directions from or what they've done so far, because the situation has only gotten worse. So it's very telling that national government wants to play a big role in their failure without explicitly mentioned that they have failed in supplying water to Johannesburg. And at the moment, just a few minutes ago, because Johannesburg has now set up a new deputy mayor position in the council, and just a few minutes ago, they've elected the MMC of Finance to be the deputy mayor, and that is an ANC member. Not only that, but she is, I forgot her name, apologies, but she just got elected to be the ANC's Johannesburg leader, and now she's been put in the deputy mayor position.
You know what that says to me? That the fact they've elected an ANC person to that deputy mayor position, it to me says that ANC internal politics is just dominating entirely the ANC's decision making. The idea behind something like a deputy mayor position is that you appoint someone to it from a member of your coalition, maybe someone from the EFF, maybe someone from one of these small parties who are trying to hold a vote of no confidence in the mayor. I think Al Jamaha are the ones who launched that. You kind of pass it out as political patronage to someone to keep everyone on board. But here it's like, no, because it was Dana Moreira versus the whoever the ANC just selected as the deputy candidate. I can't remember her name either, I'm afraid. For the regional chairmanship of the ANC. And now clearly this is we don't want to get rid of Moreira as the mayor just before the election, even though he's not the ANC leader anymore. So we're going to put you in this sort of secondary role, and then you can also be the mayor, I guess, or the deputy mayor. It's not politically smart. Like, never mind actually making the city work, because I don't think that's anywhere on the horizon. Just in terms of the politics of it, that's not going to help. And what's going to be the result of this? Well, it's probably going to be more infighting. You'll see competing for control between the deputy mayor and the mayor. As they struggle over administration of the city and who's really in charge, and maybe the ANC's coalition partners in the city will become increasingly uncooperative. I don't know. What's your take on that?
And the reason why I bring up the deputy mayor position and now being held by ANC as well as the mayorship position is that deputy mayor position, it's going to cost money, but at the same time, those ANC colleagues at the national level are saying, "Oaks, we're giving you guys more money so that we can solve this issue, and you guys are using your money to make more positions that you're not even using it to the way you're supposed to use them. You're supposed to use them to stabilize a coalition rather than to give yourself more power." And so they're not even trying to try to solve the water issue crisis. They're not. Yeah. They're going to have to present a budget soon. They can't justify now any increases to solve the water crisis because a lot of money is going to be used on this new position that really should not and is not a priority. So the priorities at the local level is not matching the priorities at the national level. At the national level, it's good to see that there's political will. They're taking it seriously. Johannesburg is being mentioned during speeches in Cape Town. It's good that there's some political will showing face. But at the end of the day, these issues have to be solved at the municipal level. And without the municipal competency, we're just putting in money into something where money is not enough to fix. You can't buy political will. It's either they want to fix it or they don't, or it's either they can fix it and they can't. And looking at the results, they don't want to and they can't.
So let's jump now to what's going on in Joburg's politics on the other side of the governance fence. And that is that today the DA announced that it was getting a defection from ActionSA. A councillor who's a member of ActionSA and a number of branches in Soweto have defected to the DA. There was a press conference held about this, and these things happen from time to time in South African politics, where you have these kind of dramatic, showy defection things. I personally don't make much of them, but they're part of that idea that the party wants to use in its campaigning to say, look, we are gaining strength, we are got momentum, everyone else is shrinking. I know ActionSA had a bunch of these back just after they got launched, where they won over some DA branches into them. I'd actually be interested to know whether it was some of the same people who defected to the ActionSA then for the DA have come back. That'd be interesting to look into. But anyway, so this was announced by the DA's mayoral candidate Helen Ziller, and she welcomed them, and she said that this was beginning of things kind of going the DA's way, and that this will impact ActionSA's ability to organize in Soweto. ActionSA responded to all of this by saying that the DA had done a good job by getting rid of a troublesome councillor who was facing disciplinary charges for I can't remember what it was, but charges of incompetence and all that sort of thing, and that they thanked the DA for it, which is the usual kind of loving language between ActionSA and the DA that we've become so used to. At the same time, yesterday we had just before this, we had a number of by-elections around the country. Now there were 3, but let's first talk about the Joburg one. Safe, Joburg seat. In fact, it's where I used to live before I moved to Cape Town. Cool. Ward 102, which is Bryanston, Bordeaux. Previous councillor, Lucinda Hardman, resigned after she said she was threatened by construction mafias in the ward. And the DA, to no surprise, won it, but they won it with sort of almost North Korean levels of support. They got 95% of the vote, the ANC on 3%, and various other parties sort of managing a bit. What was interesting about this one, though, is ActionSA didn't run. And this has been a bit of a trend, actually, is that even in places where ActionSA might do okay or reasonably, they often don't seem to have put up candidates. And I'm not sure why that is, whether that's strategy or whether that's actually simply a lack of money and resources. So how do you think things are going? It looks like the DA is feeling very pleased with itself at the moment. A ward like 102 is going to be the backbone of their efforts to take the city in the next local government election. The turnout in this one was low, but that's usual for by-elections, especially ones where there isn't a lot of competition. It does seem, though, like no one is really managing to challenge the DA in its safe space, so to speak, of these kind of Joburg suburban wards. What's your take on all this?
Yeah, so I have not the real numbers, unfortunately. I just have the percentages of how ActionSA did in Johannesburg in 2021 and 2024. In 2021 in Joburg, they got 16.05%, which is amazing for a quote-unquote small party. But in 2024, in Johannesburg, on the national ballot, they got 4.68%. Already that drop should raise alarms for ActionSA. And these announcements that political parties do, where they get someone moving from one party to theirs and they do the whole shirt exchange and all of that, the ceremony of that and the symbolism of that and all of that, that doesn't matter. But what matters is the vote that's attached to that story. With ActionSA's drop from 16% to 4%, every vote counts. And ActionSA did considerably well in Soweto. ANC got hurt real bad in 2021 because of ActionSA's presence in Soweto. So now that they have members shifting from the party to the DA, regardless of what ActionSA says, saying this one individual was incompetent, thank you for getting rid of him for us because we didn't want to sign paper. That doesn't matter. What matters is him, his vote, and the constituency he carries. He went to his respective constituency and convinced people, hey guys, stop voting ANC and EFF, vote for ActionSA instead. Now this time around, he's going to say vote for DA. He's going to mobilize votes for the DA, him and all the other people that he left with to the DA. So that's a big loss for ActionSA. And this one statement that they produced that they keep reposting on social media doesn't show the seriousness that they should be taking this at. They have participated in one by-election. I can't remember if it was this year or last year, and it was in Soweto, and they did very well in. So they are very, very strong in Soweto. Their confidence comes from there, and when go for it and they participate. Whereas in other places where ANC is a clear stronghold, or in Ward 102 where DA won recently, where DA is a stronghold, they don't participate. And I would, for their credit, I would say that's probably for both strategy and also for funding. They rather use that funding for later in the year. Whether it's a good strategy or not, we'll see at the end of the year, because there are parties that are participating in by-elections and there are parties that are not and are choosing to do so. So we'll see how that works out for them. But in terms of what's going on in Johannesburg with the water crisis that we were talking about as well, this week has been a good week for the DA. They won award and they won votes for the next election before a single ballot was even cast.
So let's look a little bit more at some of the historical details here on this particular one, and you can see the sort of difficulty that ActionSA is in generally. So if you go back to the local government election 2021, that ward 102, the DA's just won in this by-election. The DA got 65% of the vote, and ActionSA came second with 18.5% of the vote. That's not terrible. And in a low turnout by-election campaign, you might even have an opportunity to maybe win things back. Then you jump to a ward like Ward 25, which is on the sort of edge of Soweto, where the ANC got 47% and ActionSA got 26%, or just under 26%. That's also pretty impressive. So that's like the sort of wide range of support across, in both suburbs and townships. Then you go to 2024, same ward in Soweto, ANC 42%, ActionSA all the way down to 7%. And in that suburban ward, the DA actually struggled, as it often does in national elections, to match its level. ActionSA dropped from 18 to 4%. And now, it didn't even stand in this by-election. So you can see that it's not just that it's only lost in suburbs or only lost in the townships. It's losing on sort of both fronts at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, you can't entirely directly compare national and local government election. There are different things, different elections, different levels of turnout, all that. But it's not a great sign, particularly for a new party that needs sort of a bit of, you need to grow for a while before you can sustain a big setback. The only reason the DA could survive its setback in 2019 was because it had this long history of growth, which meant that people were sort of willing to stick by it, that it was this old established organization. Other parties, and the EFF I think is going to be a prime example of this, is the moment you hit your ceiling, it gets really hard to regenerate momentum as people don't see you as the hot new thing on the block. Any final thoughts on that before we just quickly talk about the other two by-elections?
Yeah, I think on that, ActionSA has definitely hit its ceiling, and its refusal to try to get more engaged in by-elections. Its refusal to take polls seriously, trying to fight against polls as well, and also its refusal to actually build internal democratic structures. A lot of people are leaving the party because they feel as if Herman Mashaba is, quote, a dictator. So all of this, all these weaknesses, they just refuse to see them, and the intelligence network is very poorly built. They only listen to themselves, and they don't listen to anyone outside of their own bubble, and it's collapsing right in front of them, and they're only going to really realize it after a loss in the next election and another loss in an election after that. But then it'll already be too late.
Yeah, I think for this is actually a really crucial election for ActionSA in that if they lose a critical mass of councillors, I mean, I'm sure they're still going to get 4 or 5% in Joburg, for example. Maybe more if they work really hard, but it's going to be difficult to sort of hold the party together if they lose that critical mass. But it's still a while to go, so maybe I will be proven wrong. Briefly, the other two elections, we'll just very briefly mention Limpopo. The South African Communist Party stood in an election in Limpopo in Polokwane, by-election Ward 34, and they got crushed again, as they did the last time they stood in the Limpopo by-election. The ANC got 72% of the vote, down from 81. The EFF up to 21 from 14. The SACP only getting 2%. Ofentse, there's been much talk of the SACP splitting off from the ANC and running independently in these elections. I still don't, even though everyone says it's going to happen, I'm still not entirely sure. But I'm pretty convinced the SACP is going to get smoked. I don't know who they're fooling. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so my take on that is that I think in this upcoming, but it is tough because these guys, they're so inconsistent. They'll say in every election cycle, we're not going to be with the ANC, we're going to run by ourselves. And then they end up not doing that at the last minute. So it's really difficult to make a prediction about what they'll do, because then I'll just end up looking stupid later on. So I'll try to not make a prediction, but still try to make my analysis.
Do you think they would have any chance?
Sure, let's work like that. Let's work with the if they ran scenario. In the if they ran scenario, I think they would get enough they would beat the threshold, quote unquote, to get a representative in the respective council that they try to get into. They'll get maybe 1, 2, or 3 councils in it, and that's okay. That's 1, 2, or 3 councils that the ANC potentially lost. Because of that, though, I don't think it's such a big deal, because in municipalities, it's the likelihood of a coalition coming up is far higher than provincial or national. And in a case where there would be a coalition, the South African Communist Party will obviously be in a coalition with the ANC. They'll maybe have a foot to stand on because they'll have their own vote in council. So some of their demands will maybe make it a bit higher on the meeting agenda, but they will still be governing with the ANC. So overall, there is no major impact in the if they run scenario.
Yeah, look, for what it's worth, I hope they really do run, because it's been very frustrating to see themselves talking about themselves as though they are a key political institution in this country, when I think that they would struggle to, I think they'd struggle to beat ActionSA in a national election, to be quite honest. And it's about time that they were taken less seriously.
Yeah, and on that, if they run as well, it's going to be such a complication in internal ANC mechanisms. They can't invite them in ANC meetings, especially meetings to build up to the election. If they're competing against them in those elections, it's going to be so complicated. And I think this is why the SACP always chicken out at the end, is because the door is closing in these very important high-level meetings that they do have a seat at, and they don't want to close that door. They want to be at the seat at the table, and really it's a tough position for them. But yeah, we'll see how it turns out.
Last thing, Ward 17, Mongoma in Zululand. This was a municipality. I think this ward was previously held by the breakaway party from the IFP, the NFP. The NFP councillor was unhappy with the NFP leadership, so he defected to the IFP. And the IFP won the ward pretty convincingly. They went from sort of 41% of the ward to 59%. The NFP went from winning the ward previously down to 12%. And the MK party got 15%. Not great. Now, this is IFP sort of territory, IFP/NFP territory. So, I wasn't expecting the MK party to win this. And yet, this is yet another underperformance by the MK party in a by-election. There have been so many. They have won a couple, but it's been much less than their provincial results would have suggested. Your thoughts, Ofentse?
Yeah, I think it's the expectations that they've set for themselves. If this was another random party, like there's this party called Truth, which actually partook in a by-election yesterday. I've forgotten which ward, and it got 5 votes. It got 5 votes. So
yeah, that was Ward 102
MK
in Joburg.
Ward 102 in Joburg. Yes, it got 5 votes. MK is technically in that same position in terms of its age. It's still a new party, yet whenever it would get 15% at a by-election level, that's a disappointment, and it's a huge expectation that they've set for themselves because of their successful election last year. That one successful election last year, that success and that momentum has definitely run out. It's run out, and I think a factor that contributes to that is the Zuma factor. When Jacob Zuma is not on the campaign trail, MK always has these disappointing elections. Whereas, obviously, when he is on the campaign trail, we saw what happened in 2024 in that election, where everyone thought they weren't going to do as well, but the polls did show that they were going to do well, and they did do well, and they are the official opposition party of South Africa. So it's very much the Zuma factor that's playing a role here. Whenever they partake in these by-elections, if Zuma isn't there, their respective candidate on the ground in the specific ward does not have the political clout to draw enough votes to get over 50%, and they'll end up staying under 20%. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out in the local government election. I doubt they'll do as successful as they did in the national election, but I am convinced that Jacob Zuma will leave Nkandla and get on the campaign trail for that, because seeing an MK running a municipality is going to be a big deal for them, especially in KZN, because that's where they get to showcase what they can do. So that's an opportunity they won't try to not take. And because of that, I think Zuma is going to be on the campaign trail for that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what does MK governance look like in practice. I
actually want to see how it would.
Yeah, it would be quite something. If you look at that ward that just had this by-election, MK got 15% of the vote, right? In the national election, that same ward, MK got 27% of the vote. So
okay,
at the very least, they should be matching that. And the fact that they're not, I think, is as you say, it suggests that they're out of steam in some ways. But that's all the time we have for today. We've gone a bit long, but thank you very much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be on tomorrow at 1:30 for the live show. If you like us, please leave us a good review. Please like the video. Please feed the algorithm, and we greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
The Daily Friend Show and The Daily Friend are a project of the Institute of Race Relations, the IRR. The IRR is a think tank which was founded in 1929 to study race relations in South Africa and works to change government policy to improve race relations through non-racialism and to ensure the prosperity of all South Africans. If you like our work and would like to support us, please go to irr.org.za and click Support the IRR. Or you can go to thedailyfriend.co.za and click the Fund Us button.